She was alive at 11:14 p.m. Her phone registered its last signal from a cell tower a quarter-mile from the sugarcane fields. After that, nothing. No signal, no movement, no body. Renata Cavalcanti's life didn't simply end. It was torn apart. 32 years old. 2 children. A lawsuit filed against the most powerful sugar mill owner in the region, scheduled to be formally submitted in 6 days. A clandestine. If you've made it this far, it's because the truth, no matter how raw or unsettling, still matters to you. Before we dive into the abyss that swallowed Renata Cavalcanti, I ask that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any investigation. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Your engagement is vital to making sure these stories aren't forgotten, to making sure silence doesn't win. The night of August 17, 2019, was no ordinary night in rural northeastern Brazil. It was the night silence became a predator and darkness an accomplice. Renata Cavalcanti, a woman of unshakable resolve, whose voice carried across the cane fields, had a meeting with destiny, or perhaps with something far darker and more deliberate. She was the spearhead of a movement bold enough to challenge entrenched power, a voice that refused to be silenced. That day, she attended a clandestine meeting, far from prying eyes, in the heart of a sugar empire. An empire that, according to many, operated beyond the limits of the law, crushing not only sugarcane but also the dignity, and sometimes the very lives of its workers. Renata had evidence. She had testimony. She had the courage many others lacked. She was days away from filing a lawsuit that could dismantle years of exploitation, lives cut short, and unchecked impunity. But the clock of justice stopped for her that night, and what followed was an act of annihilation. What happened after 11:14 p.m. wasn't a disappearance. It was a violation. A brutal tear in the fabric of reality, a rupture that ripped through Renata's life and the lives of everyone around her. Renata's absence is not the absence of someone who walked away. It is the absence of someone who was taken, undone, as if the earth itself had opened to swallow her, and then sealed shut without leaving a scar. There are no notes, no goodbyes, no evidence of voluntary flight. There is only emptiness, a vacuum expanding outward, swallowing every attempt at logical explanation, every last fragment of hope. Renata Cavalcanti's story is not a mystery meant to be solved. It is testimony to collapse, a life violently interrupted, and a system that allowed it to happen, perhaps even orchestrated it. The Canefield, vast and impenetrable, holds secrets that were never meant to be told, yet must be whispered, even if doing so leaves a deep discomfort in those who listen. In August, the backlands of Pernambuco feel like an oven that doesn't ask permission. The dense, heavy air, thick with the sweet, fermented scent of sugarcane, clings to the skin like a second layer and suffocates anyone not born accustomed to it. It smells of grueling labor, of salted sweat, of exhausted bodies, and of wealth that never reaches the hands of those who produce it, those who spill blood over every cultivated acre. In this landscape of hostile beauty and structural inequality, Renata Cavalcanti was an anomaly that unsettled people simply by existing. She wasn't the woman who bent beneath the merciless midday sun, nor the one who lowered her eyes when the boss passed. She stood tall, voice steady, shoulders squared, eyes that did not waver before anyone. She was the president of the Rural Workers' Union of São José do Agreste, a troubling figure for the region's large landowners, especially the Albuquerque family, owners of Usina São Francisco, the most powerful sugar mill in the area. The Albuquerque influence stretched for miles in every direction, weaving an invisible, suffocating web of power that controlled everything from roadside convenience stores to city hall offices, from municipal contracts to the personal fates of thousands. The mill was not just an economic engine. For many, it was a system of life and death, an almost parasitic organism feeding on land and human strength, leaving behind a permanent trail of exhaustion, debt, and despair. Usina San Francisco was more than a company. It was a feudal stronghold. The Albuquerques, armed with generations of accumulated power, controlled the local economy, politics, and even the hopes and fears of the thousands of families who depended on the cane harvest to survive. Their domain was vast, their decisions unquestioned, their word law that could not be challenged without consequence. But Renata had discovered deep cracks in that empire that believed itself untouchable. With patience and courage, she systematically documented inhumane conditions, poverty wages, punishing shifts that drained young bodies within a few years, and criminal negligence in safety standards that led to daily accidents, many fatal, many quietly buried through the complicity of local authorities. She held a mountain of evidence that could bring down a castle. Testimony recorded on cell phones, hidden inside socks and deep pockets. Photographs of workers injured and maimed by unguarded machinery. Detailed reports of inspections that were never conducted because the inspector never showed up, and fines that were never paid because the very people responsible for enforcing them were also on the payroll. It all exposed, with brutal clarity, the violence behind sugar production, the invisible blood and anonymous sweat watering every stalk before it reached someone's table as a refined white product. Her goal was crystal clear: take the Albuquerques to court and force them to pay the true price for decades of exploitation, crushed lives, and systematically stolen dignity. She wasn't seeking justice alone. She was seeking the collapse of a system that kept her people trapped in poverty generation after generation, a complete dismantling of the power structure that oppressed them all. On the night of August 17, the meeting was not one of the usual union assemblies held in daylight with official minutes recorded. It was a carefully planned secret gathering in a small mud brick house with paper-thin walls, hidden in the heart of a cane field owned by a small farmer named Manuel da Silva, a quiet, wary man who, despite the palpable fear hanging over the region like a storm cloud that refused to move on, still trusted Renata with the kind of trust reserved for someone who has no one else left to believe in. The house, isolated and without electricity, was lit by a single kerosene lamp whose flickering yellow flame cast trembling, ghost-like shadows across the raw clay walls, creating an atmosphere of urgency and conspiracy that everyone could feel against their skin. The smell of kerosene mingled with the ever-present scent of cane outside, while crickets and frogs filled the silence with their indifferent chorus. The agenda was the final review and completion of the lawsuit that would be filed days later. The workers' present faces, deeply marked by hard living, red dust, and merciless sun, listened to Renata with a volatile mixture of trembling hope and visceral fear. She spoke slowly and precisely about the risks they faced, about the retaliation that would surely follow once the lawsuit was filed, about the Albuquerque's relentless power and vast resources, about how they would not hesitate for a second to use any means necessary to protect their interests and their money. But she also spoke, her voice rising slightly at this point, about the visceral necessity of fighting back, of refusing once more to bow, of the fact that the only way to break the cycle of exploitation was to confront it head-on, even with fear lodged in the chest. The decision was unanimous, sealed by tense faces nodding in the dim light. Move forward, no retreat. The lawsuit would be filed the following week, a direct strike at the heart of the sugar empire, a silent and formal declaration of war. The tension inside that small room was almost physical, palpable like the humid air itself, a dense premonition of what was coming, a weight settling into the air and into every soul present, heavier and thicker than the eternal scent of cane. The last person to see Renata Cavalcanti alive was Manuel da Silva. He walked with her in silence to the dark edge of the Canefield where she had left her old motorcycle, a battered but dependable Honda CG 125 parked beneath the broad shade of an old mango tree. It was nearly midnight. The sky was scattered with stars that seemed indifferent to what was unfolding beneath them. Manuel remembers with disturbing clarity watching the motorcycle's dim yellow headlight drift slowly down the dirt road, a winding dark path that snaked between towering cane stalks like a river without water, quickly swallowed by the thick darkness and the plantation's silent immensity. He heard nothing unusual that night. No scream, no sudden screech of brakes, no engine stalling. Nothing to suggest trouble. Just the sound of the engine gradually fading until it vanished completely, as if the night itself had opened its mouth and absorbed the noise, swallowing the sound along with the woman producing it. The next day, Renata's motorcycle was found abandoned a few miles away on a sharp bend in the dirt road leading toward Usina, San Francisco. It was intact, without a scratch, but the key was missing from the ignition, and Renata was gone. The silence that followed was not the silence of peace or sleep. It was the silence of a vacuum tearing open in the middle of the world, an absence that screamed without a voice, an open wound that did not bleed because there was nothing left to bleed. The morning after Renata Cavalcanti vanished did not bring the light everyone expected when they opened their eyes, but a darkness even denser, more compact, and more suffocating than the night that had just passed. The news spread in an organic and terrifying way, not through radio broadcasts or newspaper headlines, but through fear-laced whispers slipping quietly between workers' shacks, passed from mouth to ear, as though speaking the truth out loud might summon danger back into the open. Renata's motorcycle, a Honda CG 125, she cared for with the caution of someone who could never afford a replacement, was found abandoned along the dirt road that wound toward Usina, San Francisco. It was intact, without a scratch or sign of impact, but the key was missing from the ignition, like something discarded in haste by someone who no longer needed what they had taken. The missing key was a devastating detail, a cruel signature that her departure had not been voluntary, that the interruption had been abrupt and imposed. When the police finally arrived hours later, with the unhurried pace of those who know they have arrived too late, or perhaps never wanted to arrive quickly at all, they appeared far more concerned with completing the bare minimum of protocol than with uncovering any truth. The officers, men raised in the region themselves, sons and grandsons of workers or overseers, knew the power of the Albuquerque family, the way one knows the weather. Inevitable, relentless, impossible to ignore. Their movements were slow, their gazes evasive, like those who look at the ground when the answer is written in the sky. The sight, it could even be called a crime scene, was handled with a negligence so profound it bordered on deliberate complicity, the passive participation of those who know what happened and prefer not to know. Manuel da Silva, the small farmer who hosted the clandestine meeting and the last person to see Renata alive, was the first called in to give a statement. His initial testimony was clear and firm as stone. Renata left his house around midnight, alone on her motorcycle, without any sign of trouble. He saw her leave with his own eyes, watched the headlight fade down the dirt road, heard the engine disappear into the dark. But as days turned into weeks and pressure from the Albuquerque family became an unbearable weight, Manuel's memory began to develop cracks that had not existed before. First, he was no longer certain of the exact time she had left. Then he wasn't sure whether the motorcycle engine had been running when she departed or whether she might have been pushing it. After a few more weeks, fear, like a slow poison that works from the inside without leaving visible marks, gradually corroded his ability to testify, to remember, to remain faithful to what his own eyes had witnessed. His voice, once steady beside Renata in meetings and moments of tension, became a faint murmur and emptied echo swallowed by imposed silence. He was not the only one to yield. Other workers who had attended the meeting that night, initially willing to speak because they believed the truth mattered, retreated one by one in the weeks that followed. Their eyes, once filled with cautious hope, now reflected a deeper, incurable terror. They had families who depended on them, debts owed to the company store, entire lives inextricably tied to Usina, San Francisco, in ways that could not be severed with a statement at a police station. The cost of speaking was too high, and everyone knew what happened to those who could not afford to pay it. The official investigation, if that heavy word can truly be applied to what followed, stalled within its first days like a truck stuck in red mud. The detective in charge, Dr. Elias Noguera, a man with many years of service in the region and many favors owed to many people, seemed to follow a carefully predetermined script whose ending had been written before it began. Searches were conducted around the Canefields. Yes, but with a superficiality that bordered on recklessness. Small teams, limited time, no systematic method, no serious. Tracking dogs were brought in with some public display, but their searches were abruptly halted without any official explanation offered to the family or the community. The Canefield itself, a suffocating green labyrinth of stalks, rising well over 6 feet high and stretching for miles in every direction, was the perfect place to hide anything or anyone. It was where the outside world ceased to exist, where sunlight arrived filtered and fractured, where sound dissolved, where tracks vanished. Renata's sandals, found days later by a cane cutter who nearly stepped on them without noticing, were the only tangible trace, the sole physical evidence that something had happened there. A simple, inexpensive pair of rubber sandals, soles facing upward in the middle of a row of cane, as if torn from the feet of someone fighting with every ounce of strength to remain standing. There was no visible blood, no clear signs of struggle in the soil, only the sandals, an ordinary, cheap object elevated into a disturbing symbol of a violently imposed absence. Renata's family was left adrift without compass or anchor. Dona Lucia, her mother, a woman already worn down by the harsh climate and hardships of life in Brazil's interior, watched the hope sustaining her quietly drain away with each day that passed without news, without a sign, without a word that might mean something. She tried to mobilize local media, and then state outlets, knocked on doors that felt made of steel, made calls that went unanswered, wrote letters that were never returned. The disappearance of a rural labor activist in a remote corner of Pernambuco did not carry the same dramatic appeal as other cases. The Albuquerque family's influence, vast and tentacular, was felt even in major newsrooms, where the story was treated with editorial distance and cold detachment, framed as a regional incident without broader consequence. The lawsuit Renata had been preparing to file, the document representing years of work, and the core of the struggle mysteriously vanished from courthouse records as though it had never existed. There was no filed copy, no case number, no official mention that such a document had ever been drafted or submitted. It was as though Renata's very intention to seek justice had been erased along with her, as though the idea of resistance itself were a crime that needed to be eliminated, even from the memory of paper. Usina, San Francisco was not merely an industrial complex listed on maps and tax documents. It was the pulsating and tyrannical heart of San Jose do Agreste, a rusted metal and smoke beast that dictated the rhythm of life and death in the region with the steady indifference of a metronome that never stops. Its massive concrete silos, stained by years of use, its smokestacks spewing thick, dark plumes into the merciless blue sky, and the cloying bittersweet odor of processed cane formed the unavoidable landscape and dominant scent. No one who lived there could escape day or night, wind at their back or in their face. It was the smell of power, the skyline of power, the skyline of power. And behind that imposing facade of productivity and prosperity lay a carefully concealed web of intimidation and control, extending far beyond the mill's physical boundaries, reaching arms few could see but everyone could feel. The Albuquerque family, led with an iron grip by the patriarch, known simply as Colonel Gustavo Albuquerque, embodied that unchecked authority. A man of few, surgically chosen words and countless carefully cultivated connections, Gustavo controlled local politics with the ease of someone convinced it was his birthright, controlled the economy with the efficiency of someone who understood money as merely another form of power, and by extension, controlled the daily lives of nearly everyone within a radius no one had ever bothered to measure precisely. His word was law without needing to be written. His will was as unquestionable as the August heat. Over time, Renata Cavalcanti had become a deep, painful thorn lodged in the Albuquerque's throat and irritation that could not simply be swallowed away. Her detailed and documented accusations of inhumane working conditions in the fields and processing sheds, poverty wages that barely sustained families without humiliation, and the systematic exploitation of cane cutters who sacrificed their young bodies for meager pay were not just bureaucratic nuisances. They were a growing and tangible threat to the dominance the Albuquerques had built brick by brick across generations. The lawsuit she was preparing to file promised to expose decades of carefully concealed illegality. Severe and fatal workplace accidents, deliberately buried to avoid compensation claims, land seized from small farmers who suddenly found their property absorbed by the mill, and a labor system that required no visible chains to function like bondage because its restraints were debt, fear, and absolute dependency. Rumors of Colonel Gustavo's fury, upon learning of the lawsuit, spread in hushed tones at every street corner in San Jose do Agreste, in every bar that smelled of cheap liquor and fear, in every mud brick house where families spoke softly even when alone. He was not a man known for patience or tolerance toward those who publicly challenged what he had constructed. For many, Renata's sudden and inexplicable absence was not a mystery in need of a detective. It was a brutal, predictable, almost inevitable consequence of crossing an invisible boundary few dared to approach. Days after her disappearance, Usina San Francisco continued operating with implacable indifference to the human life swallowed at its margins. Heavy trucks loaded with freshly cut cane moved in and out without pause in a ritual that never ended. Machines roared and shrieked day and night, and workers' faces marked by harsh sun and exhaustion that never fully lifted continued cutting cane and bearing the weight of the world as though nothing extraordinary had occurred, as though a life had not been interrupted just beyond the fields. Yet the silence among them had changed in character. It was no longer the silence of fatigue or concentration. It was a silence heavy as lead, saturated with unspoken fear and a shared, tacit understanding of what had happened on the night of August 17. No one spoke Renata's name aloud within the mill's perimeter or near its gates. No one dared even meet another's eyes when the subject drifted too close. Fear had solidified into an invisible but impenetrable wall between each worker and the truth they all recognized, but none could articulate. The police investigation, fragile from the outset due to political unwillingness and lack of independence, seemed to disintegrate. The few officers who dared pose sharper, more direct questions to supervisors and managers were met with stony stares and evasive answers that implicated no one. Vehicle entry and exit logs from the night Renata vanished, documents that would have been essential in any serious inquiry, were conveniently declared lost or non-existent. Security cameras installed at the mill's main entrance, positioned in a way that covered part of the road where her motorcycle had been found, were reportedly under maintenance that specific night. A coincidence. Another coincidence. A chain of coincidences that, to any resident of San Jose do Agreste who did not live with their eyes closed, amounted to nothing more than a smoke screen thicker and more deliberate than the plumes rising from the mill's own smokestacks, an institutionalized imposition of ignorance upon those who needed to see in order to demand accountability. The lawsuit Renata had prepared with such care and sacrifice, the one that vanished from courthouse records like smoke in the wind, was perhaps the most unsettling proof of interference. How could a document so extensive, so heavy with evidence and signatures, simply evaporate from public record? The official explanation, delivered with the ease of those long accustomed to lying without flushing, was an administrative error, an elegant, empty euphemism for the heavy hand of the Albuquerques touching papers that should not have existed. Without the lawsuit, Renata's life's work lost its legal structure, its formal shape, its judicial weight. It was as if her identity, as an agent of change, had been erased alongside the document that formalized her fight. Her family appealed to state and later federal authorities, but bureaucracy designed to protect itself and the Albuquerque's influence proved impenetrable barriers. The cane fields continued to grow, indifferent and green, and the mill continued to operate, an insolent monument to impunity that did not even need to hide to survive. Time in San Jose do Agreste did not heal. It never had. It simply layered the terror, sediment by sediment, until fear became part of the region's geology, indistinguishable from the cracked red earth that sustained both the cane fields and the secrets buried beneath them. Heavy months dragged by like wounded animals, transforming Renata Cavalcanti's disappearance from an open, bleeding wound into a deep scar still tender, never fully forgotten by those who had watched it form. The community, once partially united by the hope Renata embodied in voice and presence, now lived hunched beneath a double cloak of fear and resignation more suffocating than the August heat. Her absence had become something more complex and more disturbing than a painful memory. It had become a constant, oppressive presence, an imposed void that manifested in the silence of workers waiting for buses at dawn, in the furtive glances that darted away when conversations drifted too close to certain topics, in the abrupt way discussions died the moment the Albuquerque name surfaced, even by accident. The cane field, once a symbol of labor and daily survival, had transformed in the collective imagination into something else entirely. A green and impenetrable monument to impunity, a labyrinth guarding a brutal secret, stretching endlessly in every direction and swallowing any trace of truth that dared approach its edge. Renata's family, especially her mother, Dona Lucia, and her young children, growing up without understanding what had happened to the woman who had brought them into the world, felt the weight of that void more sharply and more personally than anyone else in the community. Dona Lucia, a woman whose faith had long been the foundation of her existence, saw that faith tested with a brutality unmatched by any hardship she had previously endured. She did not cry openly in public squares. Her grief took another form, deeper, quieter. It lived inside her like a flame that neither extinguished nor warmed, a permanent exhaustion etched into every line of her face and slowing each daily movement. Renata's children, still at an age when the world should have felt safe and full of possibility, asked about their mother with the devastating insistence of innocence. And Dona Lucia stood before them without words, unable to construct an explanation small enough to fit within a child's understanding. How do you explain to a child that their mother did not leave by choice, did not choose absence, but was torn away, undone, erased by forces that lacked official names, yet had unmistakable addresses? The emptiness inside the home Renata once occupied was a silent structural collapse, an architecture of family violated beyond repair. Her bed remained untouched, but with each morning that broke without her return, the brutal certainty that she would not come back grew heavier, more definitive, more suffocating. The official investigation, which had been stillborn from the beginning due to a lack of will and independence, was formally archived with the bureaucratic coldness of someone signing paperwork before heading to lunch. The final report, a technical and glacial document, that could have been written before any meaningful inquiry occurred concluded, with calculated vagueness, that there were insufficient elements to determine the cause of disappearance. One sentence. A single sentence that replaced months of inadequate investigation, and, to the community that had witnessed it all, sounded less like a professional conclusion and more like an institutional certificate of impunity, a declaration that Renata Cavalcanti's life had not been deemed worthy of the effort a serious and honest investigation would require. Detective Elias Nogueira, who had overseen the superficial searches and fruitless interrogations, was transferred weeks later to another district, not as punishment, but as routine career movement many interpreted as reward disguised as administration. In that forgotten corner of the Backlands, justice seemed to carry a known price tag, one easily paid by those with sufficient resources. The disappearance's impact on the labor movement Renata had built with personal sacrifice was devastating and enduring in ways statistics could never capture. The collective courage she had cultivated over years, meeting by meeting, conversation by conversation, was replaced by paralyzing fear that required no explicit threat, because the memory of what had happened to her functioned as a permanent, silent warning. Workers who had once begun to believe in the possibility of rights and dignity now lowered their heads and accepted the conditions imposed by Usina São Francisco with a resignation born not of agreement, but of survival. No one raised their voice in meetings that no longer occurred. No one dared ask questions that might reach the wrong ears. The lawsuit Renata had prepared so meticulously, and which had vanished without explanation, stood as a constant and terrifying reminder of what happened to those who tried to use the law against those who stood above it. The cane fields continued to grow with the perfect green indifference of a nature unconcerned with what unfolded among its stalks. But for those living in their shadow and beneath the weight of what they concealed, the fields had become a place of dread, a daily physical reminder that the earth could take a whole person and return only sandals. Renata's sandals, the only concrete trace remaining from her final night, were kept by Dona Lucia with the care reserved for irreplaceable things. A simple, inexpensive object transformed into a grim relic, a silent testimony to a violation that had found no official language for its naming. They did not tell the story of departure. They told the story of interruption, a life torn from its footing, while still standing and still fighting. The mystery of Renata Cavalcanti was never resolved. It deepened, embedding itself in the landscape and collective memory of that community. A dark secret the Pernambuco Backlands refused to surrender. Years passed after that. August dawned in 2019, when Renata Cavalcanti disappeared between the cane stalks and never returned. The seasons cycled with nature's indifference. Rains came and went. Drought returned, and the children who once cried for their mother grew older with the weight of her absence, settling into their bones like something absorbed without consent. The void Renata left in São José do Agreste remained where it had first opened, but it changed shape over time. It was no longer the sharp, bleeding emptiness of fresh loss, the kind of pain with jagged edges that cuts at every touch. It had hardened. It fused into the landscape itself, as natural and inescapable as the scent of cane that no one noticed anymore, because it had stopped being unfamiliar. Usina São Francisco continued operating with the offensive regularity of those who have never been forced to answer for anything. Its trucks hauling cane along the dirt roads it helped wear down, its smokestacks releasing smoke into a sky that stayed blue and indifferent above it all. The Albuquerque family, as untouchable as ever, expanded their holdings beyond municipal borders, purchased land in neighboring regions, and further consolidated their political and economic dominance with the ease of those who have never needed to hide their actions. Life moved forward for those who could move forward. For the rural workers of São José do Agreste, and especially for Renata's family, nothing ever returned to what it had been. Her disappearance was not merely a tragic, isolated event. It was a collapse, a deep and exposed fracture in the region's social structure, a violation that continued to echo in every silence that followed when her story came too close to the surface. Dona Lucia, the mother, who waited for her daughter every single day without exception in the years that followed, aged in a way that went beyond the simple passage of time across a face. It was an aging shaped by accumulated disillusionment, hopes raised and extinguished, raised again and extinguished once more, doors closed in her face, phone calls unanswered. The eyes that once carried a resilient and almost stubborn faith, the kind of faith that survives drought, hunger, and abandonment, began to hold the permanent shadow of a pain that found comfort in neither prayer nor promise. She never stopped searching, in her quiet and persistent way, for any trace that might remain, any word that could resemble an answer, any gesture from any authority that might signal genuine concern for her daughter's disappearance. She found little, almost nothing. Renata's sandals, preserved with the care of someone guarding their only sacred object, were the only physical link left between her and the daughter who had been erased from the world. She kept them covered with a clean cloth, as if tending to a pair of simple rubber sandals. Renata's children grew up beneath the lingering cloud of their mother's disappearance, present in every conversation that never happened and every question answered without enough clarity to satisfy a child who gradually became an adult without realizing when the shift occurred. They learned slowly and without choice to live with absence as a permanent part of their identity, with the brutal and irreversible certainty that their mother had not abandoned them of her own will, that she had been taken by a force known by many names, though everyone in São José do Agreste recognized it when they saw it, even if no one could speak it aloud without consequence. The investigation, formally archived years earlier, was never reopened. New authorities arrived with speeches about transparency and commitment to justice, walked the corridors of power for a time, and left for other offices in other cities, without leaving behind anything that could be called progress in Renata Cavalcanti's case. The file remained untouched in its yellowing folder, a page officially turned in a book no one with real authority wanted reopened. The lawsuit she had prepared through years of meticulous work, the one that vanished from courthouse records as if it had never existed, was never recovered. There was no copy anywhere, no digital trace, no official memory that such a document had been drafted by such a person. It was as though the very existence of that fight for justice, the attempt to use the law to protect those the law rarely protected, had been swept away in the same motion that erased the woman leading it. The system, in its bureaucratic coldness that works so efficiently to shield some and so poorly to shield others, imposed silence with the practiced precision of generations. And silence became the official version, the only narrative preserved in public records. The labor movement Renata, once led with unapologetic conviction, never regained its voice. Fear had taken root too deeply within the community. Any attempt at collective organization, any gathering that faintly resembled the assemblies of the past, was quickly stifled before it could gain traction. The workers who had once begun to believe in enforceable rights now accepted the mill's conditions with a bitter resignation that was not surrender, but survival. Renata left no legacy of triumph. She left a warning that everyone understood. The cost of challenging that power was annihilation, not only of the individual who dared, but of everything she had built. The cane fields still stretch for miles, in every direction from São José do Agreste to Green, dense, indifferent. They do not speak. They do not reveal. They absorb what is given to them and grow over it. Renata Cavalcanti's story has no comforting resolution, no ending that restores balance. It is the story of a void imposed where a life once stood, of silence manufactured where a voice once rose, of a mystery left unresolved not for lack of clues, but because of the overwhelming power of those who do not want it solved. It is proof once again that in certain places and under certain conditions, Truth can be buried so deeply that even time cannot exhume it. The Canefields guard Renata Cavalcanti's secret. The Mill guards Renata Cavalcanti's secret. The silence guards Renata Cavalcanti's secret. And that secret must be whispered, so the void does not become absolute, so her memory does not disappear as well. So the echo of the scream no one heard that August night continues to exist as long as someone remains willing to listen.